Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast. Another one taking a look here at Attila Total War with me, a host, Imperial Dane. This time we're having a bit of a look here at the Celts, who just recently released. A bit of a review here of the content made available and what it actually is, and sort of also some ideas there, sort of how to play these new factions, because there might be some of it, unclarity on that. Or lack of clarity, I suppose. Might be a wiser choice of words there. So, with the Celts, basically, the Celt package there, you get these three factions, previously sort of a Nordic thing basically taking over there, but they completely swapped out there. Also new Celtic mercenaries hang about there, basically also free to play with, of course. The Celts themselves do cost money to play with, of course. You can play against them even if you don't get it, so of course no things there. But overall, three factions there, all with the swift spoils, which basically allows them to sort of, basically gain a lot more money from raiding. A lot of it, basically. Also, all the units have guerrilla deployment, basically meaning they have a much wider zone of deployment in any battle, meaning they can overall control the flow of the battle a bit more, get close to the enemy right away. And that's actually going to be a bit important once we get into sort of deeper depth with them. Then you sort of have the more unique traits here. For example, the Abdanians are really good, for example, at looting and basically sort of causing absolute havoc when going through any town. They can really gain a lot of money from that. You've got the Picts, who are basically night attackers like nothing else, and don't need any sort of particular abilities for the commander to be able to attack during the night, and they actually get a morale boost, meaning they're actually stronger in the night. Rather terrifying lot. And then you'll find you've got the Caledonians, who actually gain cheaper agents and can also do things cheaper, and they can also be more successfully, so they're rather than that, you got a bit covert ops in that department. So that's sort of, the outward look at it. Let's actually have a bit of a close look here with the Celts and see what they're all about, shall we? Whoops, I don't want that. Go away. There we go. So, the Celts. All new faction, all new, series of factions, of course, all new roster with all pretty much units, no Germanics hiding about there. They're all Celts, with all their strengths and all their weaknesses. And of course you might be wondering, well, what are the specific strengths and weaknesses of the Celts? Well, in that regard, you recall that bit about the guerrilla deployment, that rather ought to give the hint. They're very much an offensive shock faction. They need the guerrilla deployment because they're not that tough. In particular, early on, they're actually pretty weak. Well, for example, the spearmen, for example, are rather weak. They can't really resist a good punch, for example. They're low on health, they're low on armor. The shields are small, which overall renders them, rather easy targets, for example, for archers, but also means they can't, for example, absorb a hit very good. Also noted, for example, here, the early spearmen don't even have any sort of shield wall, so they can't, really take a charge very well either. And that's sort of one of the bigger issues there with the Celts early on. You have to be offensive. You're not really good at defending. You have to get in and get in aggressively. Otherwise, you're very likely to end up losing if you actually end up on the receiving end of an enemy infantry charge, because they're just going to tear through you because your health is low. Your morale is not strong and your armor is even lower. That basically means you're going to suffer a lot of casualties quickly, and they're then going to break very quickly. It's not like the Romans are actually about the same morale for a lot of the sort of standard units. On the other hand, the Romans are also a lot tougher and other bits, so that's something actually quite important there to keep in mind with the Celts early on. Again, also sort of gives you an idea to why guerrilla deployment is necessary for you, and also why you need to sort of get around it. It also means, of course, defences and all that are that much harder for you. Of course, you can use the terrain, but overall you're actually better off trying to rely on night or ambushes actually to sort of deal with the enemy, try to sort of catch them there, and then sort of get in quickly. That's actually something that favours the Celts. So in that regard, the Celts are more ambushes. Of course, also night attacks sort of deal with larger forces. You can, for example, cut off an army, then further reinforcements, charge in, get unpleasant. So in that regard, again, you're not really looking to play fairly playing like the other factions if you're playing as the Celts. If you're trying to play them, you're going to get a bit disappointed. Of course, they all have a bit apart there, except for the Picts, where they can sort of play a bit more like the other factions, or a bit more standardly. The Abdanians, for example, have a bit more tougher melee infantry. They can sort of hold up in a fight decently, whereas the Caledonians also got a bit of tougher spear infantry, though of course note in both cases both of them are pretty much what you'd consider elite troops, which require more specific buildings to hire. Also, another important fact about the Celts, they're very short on archers. I mean, again, unless you're playing, for example, the Caledonians, which do have a sort of more specialization towards that, and a bit spearmen, in fact, this is about as good as it gets. They got some decent spearmen, some javelin throws, skirmishers, got some archers. They can also get the cheapest crossbowmen in the game, in fact, though that does require a bit of advanced industry building actually to get there, a bit harder than, for example, what it is with the Germans, actually, surprisingly enough. But beyond that, there's not really a lot of archers. There's not really a lot of cavalry either. In fact, there's not a lot of things except a lot of infantry. I mean, this is probably the most infantry-heavy faction in the game, or sort of set of factions in the game, compared to anything else. And again, note, they're very much about getting offensive. They're not very good at defense. Of course, as you sort of take up, they can become a bit more tougher. Your later spearmen, though, again, not an awful long branching tree there. They can sort of resist charges a bit better, but overall they're not strong. Again, you want to be on the offensive. You want to attack. And so in that regard, I mean, you're also going to realise there's some things you're going to probably struggle a bit more. Of course, in the sort of the English and all the sort of European, where it's more wooded, you're probably going to watch things. You've got the terrain to work for you. You're also finding armies to a large extent also relying on infantry, so you can sort of work with that. The problem is, for whatever reasons, you might decide, you know, to go to Africa, or heavens forbid, the Middle East. Bigger problems might arrive there with the heavier cavalry armies there. But also no better archers. I mean, sure, the Germans can get longbowmen, but that's rather later in the game, and by that point you might already crush them beneath your Celtic boot. So that's a little detail there to keep in mind while playing as the Celts, and very, in fact, very important one. It also means, for example, you want to be careful about choosing your fights early on, and I pray they don't attack one of your cities, because you're going to struggle very much in dealing with that if they have a large army. It also means a direct assault on the city as the Celts is also a pretty tricky thing. But that's not all there is to the Celts. They actually have a lot of interesting abilities as well, or factions parts there. For example, they have a slightly different farm building here compared to the other barbarian kingdoms. In fact, this is something more resembling the Sassanids. That is, they have a building that operates completely independent of fertility. Which means, in fact, it also gives you a ton of food. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how much food that thing gets you. It doesn't give you a lot of money, though, but still, I mean, compare these two, and this one's clearly the better deal. It gives you more money and more food. Of course, had the fertility been better, you might have gotten more money out of this one, but still, it's a little thing to keep in mind. It also gives you access to, well, what little cavalry the Celts do have. That's a little sort of thing there to keep in mind. With it, they can actually give you a lot of food and a decent amount of change, certainly compared to the ones. That's really what you want to build a lot of, as the Celts are those, well, bullies in the end. In fact, they might actually be a bit too good when you look at things, maybe. So a little thing there about, you know, the Celts, really, that's one of their sort of unique aspects. They also have something none of the previous sort of DLC factions so far had, which is also pretty interesting. They actually got more unique skills for their generals. You can actually get something for sort of more specific public order, but also, and this is pretty rare, sanitation. Yes, indeed, leave it to the Celts to have a general and governor who actually bothers about sanitation, not the Romans. And they also got some, well, raiding specific, and looting for that matter, specific skills as well. So they might lack some other details compared to the other generals, but I do think it also does play into more the raiding specific stuff, part of the, well, Celtic playstyle. And in fact, they have buildings that even sort of play towards that. The raid structure, which you can't really quite show off here, unless maybe I go to war with the Romans, seize their city, and maybe not, no, probably not. Though, hang on, let me just load up my game. And turns out my game doesn't actually have room to sort of show it off, but basically you've got the raider structure here, which basically allows you to sort of gain even further bonuses to raiding, which means as the Celts, raiding can actually become very profitable. They also actually add in a bit of garrison to sort of tech them up, basically some skirmishers, even in a bit of a public order, but then also add in a lot of squalors. So it's something you have to be careful with. They also can also be taken up very quickly and taken down very quickly, so it's sort of thing, you know, we need to do with something here, set it up, raid a lot, take some cities, move on, then can sort of take it down and up for something else. It's not something you actually want to hang around with. It's another thing then again, in that regard, the Celts are very much sort of built around raiding, even towards sort of the Nordics, which they're in, which sort of were supposed to be a bit more raiderish. I mean, they completely pale in comparison to the Celts. I mean, they look like pure amateurs, you know, burning down monasteries in Ireland. Blah. Nothing for the Celts anyway, so a little thing there to also keep in mind with them. I mean, it's not going to be a huge public order bonus, but I suppose it's something. Of course, there's also a very high likelihood of catching the plague, so keep that in mind. But it can help a bit, it can help a bit. A little extra detail there, but of course, looking here, of course, you see a much larger Caledonian Empire I've managed to build up here. Of course, they're a bit more built around the Celtic there, and in fact, they get some other specific parts. They actually get some rather unique buildings which actually require conditions. It's not, for example, you know, you just need a resource or something or a tech. You actually need specific conditions here. For example, you need to have majority control of, you know, with Celtic paganism in the regions, you're controlling 5 major religious buildings before I can build this one, and you actually get a nice fat bonus. Same, for example, you have a marketplace which has absolutely one of the most powerful bonuses I've ever seen, since it actually just all regions adjacent to it, even in other provinces, basically generate more money, which is absolutely crazy. And then you finally got the Bard's Hall, which also gives you some huge chunky bonuses and allows you to sort of recruit some berserkers as well. So there's a bit there to sort of work with, if you will, as the Celts in that regard. And of course, as I mentioned there, progress, you do get some slightly tougher infantry, but even the sort of their heavy infantry in most cases aren't that durable either. The Highland archers don't actually have longbows. They do have basically a higher rate of fire, and the only thing that can compare to that are the Royal Persian archers. And those are, well, basically all the way over in the east, and they can even snipe as they hit the elite status, meaning they can fire from, well, the trees and not be spotted, since it doesn't give them away. So there's a few details there to sort of keep in mind. As the Celts in that regard, they do give a lot. Again, though, it is a rather more unique playstyle, and again, it's not one we can sort of just set up a line and sort of receive the assault. If you try that, you're going to get hurt badly. But on the other hand, if you sort of get around that early on, you can sort of get the better units, you can sort of hold on, and can then also begin to sort of play the sort of advantages they have. Again, they sort of rely a lot on these cattle, which really sort of help out, because again, they basically just provide a ton of food, no matter what the fertility is, which basically means, you know, everybody else is sort of largely worried about as the ages progress, Attila, and, you know, the climate change comes in closer. You're basically going, well, I've got my bullies. I've got nothing to worry about, largely. It does also allow more to focus on economy, in fact. So some little fun details about the Celts. I mean, so far they've been, well, reasonably fun actually to play with, if anything, though certainly again a bit different, and certainly very challenging to actually form a defense with, since usually, in particular early on, they very quickly fall apart if attacked. Again, low morale, low health, low armor, and again, it's very few elite units to actually sort of approach anything in terms of durability, say a Germanic or Roman soldier. So very much keep that in mind, or you might be out for a nasty surprise. But overall, I personally find the Celts to be worth, again, interesting, fun to play with, certainly something else compared to the other factions, and certainly again, they're adding in some interesting ideas there as well. It'd just be great if they sort of snuck them back, you know, in reverse to some of the already pre-existing factions here and there in some manner or the other. But again, if you like raiding, if you like attacking, if you like ambushing, if you like night attacks, then the Celts are very much your thing in some manner or the other. If you just, of course, just want to play with the Celts again, they're your thing. But overall, a fun lot, and again, I'd say, you know, go for it. And again, if you're not really interested in Celts or anything what they offer, you know, you're probably not going to miss out that much, really. I mean, they're not, you know, decidedly necessary, but they do have a bit of fun there in them for those curious. So I think that rather sort of covers my little DLC review here of the Celtic Culture Pack. Hopefully this might have informed you a bit, might get you a bit interested, or turned you off completely, in which case, of course, that is also quite fair. So hopefully this has been informative, hopefully this has made you closer to an actual decision, or even, you know, enlighten you to the fact that it exists. So, thank you all for watching, and see you another time. Bye!